I do, and we can probably continue discussing about. First, I want to go back to Gaza because you said some other comments there. Something about bubbles being formed. Can you elaborate on the plan? Then we can get into the discussion of what Gaza could look like 5 to 10 years from now. Because I'm seeing some news that is, pretty shocking. Something along the lines of the U.S. rebuilding Gaza over 10 years, and all Palestinians in Gaza are being displaced to another territory. First, I thought it was off-the-cuff remarks, but now seeming more and more like potential policy moving forward.
Yeah, I obtained these documents. I didn't obtain these documents. They were uploaded to the Prime Minister's office website, Netanyahu's website, in Hebrew, that were produced, I guess, in early 2024 as part of something called Project Neom, which I'm sure you know about because you're in the region, and it involves the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And it was about connecting through a destroyed and then rebuilt Gaza, Israel through Gaza, and bringing Gaza into the Abraham Accords and basically turning it into a kind of Dubai on the Mediterranean. The blueprints and the illustrations show like this flourishing paradise. And of course, Israel gets to take over the gas fields right off the coast of Gaza. So that's sort of a positive ricochet effect for Israel. But basically everybody lives in peace, but there's a 4-part diagram that begins with war, then shows Gaza being totally destroyed, which is what's happening right now in deliberate fashion. Then then the population is quote unquote de-radicalized and put in these bubbles, what I would call concentration camps. And then 4, paradise comes into being. So these were uploaded.
Can you talk about those bubbles? Can you explain those bubbles?
Yeah, I will. I just wanted to say, just for the reference of everyone watching this, in case they, want something to refer to. So those same blueprints and illustrations were then spun out into something which the Washington Post has just reported on. If you think that I'm like spinning out some crazy conspiracy theory, it's called the Gaza Reconstitution, Economic Acceleration and Transformation Trust, or the Great Trust. And it's been reported in many places, but the engine for this was 2 Israeli tech billionaires who also helped conceive the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they have these aid hubs, which you'll see thousands of people descend on in chaotic fashion. They throw out boxes of aid, force mostly the men of the population to go out and compete to get some boxes as starvation descends on Gaza. And many of them get shot by the Israeli military, which is using live weapons as a form of crowd control. All of this described to me by Anthony Aguilar, but you can also see it on video. All right, these aid hubs are the only place where many people can get food in southern Gaza. So they have to come to them. And eventually the aid hub will be the basis of a larger population center, which will be controlled through biometrics, and which, according to the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, the population will not be able to leave without the permission of those who control the camp grounds, which would presumably be the Israeli military. They're planning one for 500,000 people in the area known as Mawasi, which is all war refugee tents right now. And, as part of that, the biometrics will filter out people who have supposedly radical ideology, and they'll basically be disappeared. But then the bubbles are a transition on the way to this, Dubai on the Mediterranean, and people who live in the bubble will be offered incentives to leave. They'll actually be paid to leave Gaza. But what we're seeing right now in real time, in my opinion, is a kind of final solution to a genocide starting to take form. And there's no negotiation that can take place until Israel gets what it wants, because Steve Witkoff and the Trump administration is essentially controlled by this foreign entity in Tel Aviv through the influence of figures like Miriam Adelson, who has contributed more to Donald Trump's campaigns than any other donor and is a proxy for Netanyahu. In 2018, Miriam Adelson said she wanted Donald Trump to annex the West Bank, and she gave him $150 million. And he's doing so now. He's now signaling that he will do that.
So I started looking into the impact, the influence AIPAC has over U.S. foreign policy, something I hear about a lot. And the numbers were pretty shocking. I think in any country having anybody really that seeks the incentive of another country, whether it's Saudi, whether it's Israel, whether it's France or Australia, where I come from, should not really exist, or at least disclose that this is what the intention is. But the way it happens with AIPAC, and you can explain it a bit more for the audience, and how much influence it actually has, maybe state some of the facts and maybe some of your assumptions or opinions on top of it. But essentially, AIPAC has US citizens with a lot of money, mainly Jewish, that want the best for Israel. They're also American citizens, and they donate money to AIPAC, and AIPAC uses that money to influence US politicians with their interests of Israel as their priority, which I think is just unfair for any country, including like for the US or any other country. That just shouldn't be the case. Every money that's spent in the US should be influencing politicians to do what's best for the US, not for any other country. But how much does AIPAC really have in terms of influence? I understand they do have influence, but when you look at someone like Ellison, how much he donated to Trump, Elon donated even more money to Trump, and that barely lasted a few months, the alliance, before it broke off. So if Elon, who donated the most money to Trump, couldn't have Trump not implement whatever, not pull out the what was it, the electric car subsidies that he had.
Yeah,
he pulled them off. So he couldn't influence Trump to keep those subsidies in place. You have Ellison impacting Trump to the extent of potentially ethnic cleansing Gaza. It's hard to really believe that's the case. That have that much influence in the country.
Well, I mean, I guess you have to give AIPAC credit there. Look at how much Qatar has given to Donald Trump. I mean, he bought, what did they give him? Trillions? And they seem to have very little political influence. Pam Bondi, the attorney general for Donald Trump, was Qatar's chief lobbyist. Kash Patel, the FBI director, he also did some lobbying for Qatar. And Pam Bondi and Kash Patel could not be more pro-Israel. And this partly has to do with them needing to serve the hegemonic political structure that's been established for generations in this country. It also has to do with the influence of AIPAC. And then there are points of leverage for Israel beyond AIPAC. As I mentioned, Miriam Adelson, Larry Ellison as well, who you mentioned, and runs all these data centers for Oracle. He is a diehard Zionist. His son, David Ellison, is reportedly going to buy CBS News and hand over production duties to Barry Weiss, who runs the Free Press, the premier voice of the kind of pro-Israel 1% in the United States. So AIPAC is something that represents a much broader structure of Zionist influence within American culture and politics. And what AIPAC does that's so effective is it focuses very closely on grooming politicians from the moment they enter Congress and even before. Actually, I went to the outskirts of an AIPAC conference in DC, the AIPAC summit in 2011.